So there have been two clips that have emerged, found by, I guess, the guy at CNN.
K-File.
K-File. And it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. doing an interview with a writer back in 2016. And this is I think is in the run-up to the election. Do we know the exact date of this?
Let me see if I can find the exact date.
I don't know if the exact date is there, but this first one is, I think, in the run-up to the election. And RFK is talking to this writer who has written a scathing view of like Trump supporters and Trump people in his direct sort of like universe. And RFK is so impressed by it, he's reading it back. And it is really fascinating. And the name of the show that he did this on was called Ring of Fire. Huh. And at the time, RFK Jr. was one of three hosts, I think, in 2016. The other was Mike Papantonio, who is the lawyer that I sometimes interview when I go down to Las Vegas for the Tort Conference. And then the third co-host was someone who was of middling talent, wasn't necessarily the greatest broadcaster, and his name was Sam Seder. I was not involved in this interview. A lot of times what would happen is Kennedy would do an interview, and then I would do an interview asynchronistic. We weren't there together. Here is Robert F. Kennedy quoting Matt Taibbi back to him back in 2016.
You know, one of the things that you write so beautifully, and your stuff is so fun to read, but you write about Trump. Quote, the way that you build a truly vicious nationalist movement is to wed a relatively small core of belligerent idiots to a much larger group of opportunists and spineless fellow travelers whose primary function is to turn a blind eye to things. We may not have that many outright Nazis in America, but we have plenty of cowards and bootlickers, and once those fleshy dominoes start tumbling into the Trump camp, the game is up. When you talk about fleshy dominoes, Chris Christie comes to mind.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a pretty good joke there by RFK, who sounded a lot more coherent than he does in 2024.
To be fair, he was reading back Taibbi's own words to him.
Yeah. Well, good joke by Taibbi then. Also more coherent.
Does anybody think that Donald Trump has not surrounded himself by belligerent idiots this time around? And then can anybody figure out who is this year's Chris Christie? An opportunist, spineless fellow traveler turning a blind eye to all of it. We know that RFK went to Harris and offered his services. She wasn't interested. And so despite the fact that RFK had this to say at that time about Donald Trump and his universe, and this notion of like a hateful nationalist movement, he turned a blind eye and became an opportunist, according to way Matt Taibbi wrote it at the time. And here is RFK, I think a little bit later in 2016, talking about Donald Trump and the statements he made at that time. And it's not like he said anything different, right? I mean, now he's talking about actually deporting 11 million people on day one of his administration. Here is Kennedy, and at the end, you can hear his middling talented co-host.
The easiest thing for a politician to do is to appeal to fear. And you can see that every statement that Donald Trump makes is fear-based. Every statement he makes. You know, we have to be fear of the Muslims. We have to be fear of the of the black people, and particularly the big black guy, Obama, who's destroying this country, who's making everybody miserable, and only one person has the genius and the capacity to solve these things. I'm not going to tell you how I'm going to do it. Just trust in me, vote for me, and everything will be great again. And of course, that is a really, that whole thing is like a carnival barker. But carnival barkers make a lot of money. And, as the most famous carnival barker of all time said, P.T. Barnum, you can fool, let me paraphrase, a lot of the people a lot of the time. And I think that's, and the way, and there's a strict, easy formula for doing that, and that is to blend fear with these hyperbolic promises about what you're going to deliver.
Well, it's a terrifying. Yes, that was all the clip that was pulled. But I just also want to emphasize this notion of easy formula, fear and promises without explaining how you're going to do it. So the easy formula would be these vaccines are creating a disease. These chemicals in our food are creating disease and causing early death. Even if there's maybe some element of truth buried in there. And how am I going to fix it? I know exactly how to fix it. Really?
I'm the guy.
No legislation. I'm the guy. I'm going to come in and I'm going to appoint the people, and I know the people that are going to be there, and that's what it is. And that is let me check my notes, easy formula.
He even combined this in that unearthed video from that fundraiser he was doing back when he was running for president, maybe a year ago at this point, where he said that COVID was a bioweapon that was designed to hurt all races except the Chinese and Ashkenazi Jews. So that's
weird combo.
It's a little weird. It's alluding to past anti-Semitic connections with communists, I think, is kind of like the overarching framework of that conspiracy theory. But like how he sounded there in 2016, talking to you or on Ring of Fire and talking about what Taibbi was saying, is a different it's a different person. I mean, like I'm not trying to speculate, but he's lost his mind, and like it's the best case scenario in his situation is that he's like really lost it, and he doesn't know exactly fully what he's saying. But Trump is trying to appoint an absolutely crazy person to head this major government agency.
Yeah, I mean, I had forgotten. It was rare that there would be conversations directly between Kennedy and I, but it happened, and I didn't. I was shocked when I was listening to this. I had no expectation. I didn't even realize we were still doing it together in 2016. I stopped doing it in 2020, and maybe it was around 2016 when he left the show, and I started doing it solo. And but I suspect there's a lot more that people are going to start digging through those archives. I think you have to become a member. I'm no longer affiliated with the show, but I encourage everybody to become a member of that show to dig through those things. But I think the press is going to beat you there. I think there's going to be more that comes out because Kennedy. And there were times where we had conversations about, and maybe this will come out too, about vaccinations. And we did it, I think it may have been on this show, actually, when I was in that tort conference one year. And maybe we should try and dig that up. But I had questioned him early in the early aughts. There was a question, and I thought it was a legitimate question about thimerosal. And by the time, I was involved in this publicly, they had taken thimerosal out of vaccines, I think around 2003, and everybody was waiting 2 or 3 years or 4 years to see if this would impact the autism rates. And it didn't. And I think I asked him, and I haven't listened to this, or I don't know if I ever listened back, but I think I definitely asked him about this, and I think he said they didn't really take it out, or something to that effect. I mean, it was a really unconvincing thing for him to argue, but he was not pushing this stuff really significantly during the Obama years. And I don't know if that was because he thought that maybe there was an opportunity for him politically and that would be problematic. And then once that passed, he decided to heck with it. I don't know. But I do know his politics have also changed.
Sometimes someone with a lot of trauma, and he has had a lot, and not to say that he hasn't done some really bad things in his past too, which he's admitted to, right? Like, I guess we're coming out sympathetic towards him to a degree, but it's just like there was seemingly a break that happened. I mean, I remember he was at the Dakota Access Pipeline protest when I was covering that back in 2016, and there were very few Democrats showing up there. That was
his record on environmental work is great, but he doesn't seem to be interested in that anymore. In fact, he called climate change an excuse for authoritarianism, and so I think
it's the way that a lot of other people get sucked down these conspiracy rabbit holes, right? Something breaks. So you go down some sort of thread, perhaps it touches on some past trauma, and maybe he really does have that brain worm. Who knows? But it sounds like an entirely different person. I was not prepared to be as struck by that contrast.
Also, yeah, it's not, I don't think it's a naked decision for money, but like when you get positive feedback for these type of things, it's very, very difficult to.
It's easy to justify.
It's easy
why
to
people leave
yourself.
the left. It's why people leave the left, and then they'll, I'm a new kind of thinker. I'm not heterodox. I'm just open to any and all ideas. It's the same story. It's because they start maybe to get a little resentful about I'm not making as much money as this person, or I have this opinion that doesn't align with Democrats or the left that I'm now going to look more into because I'm bitter that I'm not making all this money. And then, I can get money, a lot more money, based on this opinion that I already hold. And maybe this opens up a whole different set of politics for me and a whole different bank account.
Yeah, and
maybe.
I don't think even people are that conscious of it.
But that's what I'm saying, how it goes.
That's the mental process, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, folks. With that said, you can become a member of the Majority Report at jointhemajorityreport.com. It's your support that makes this show possible. Jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, don't forget Just Coffee, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, hot chocolate. Use the coupon code Majority, get 10% off. Emma, what's happening on ESPN?
Yesterday, Bradley and I gave our picks against the spread. I also talked a little bit about the Daniel Jones benching, and now he was just cut, which seems gratuitous. Giants completely collapsing. YouTube.com/ESPN show.
And Left Reckoning this week. I can't remember.
Yeah, Matt and David were joined by friend of the show, Ryan Grimm, to discuss what's next for progressive elected officials and how they relate to the movement at large. You can check that out at youtube.com/leftreckoning, and you can access the post game at patreon.com/leftreckoning.
Tommy from Ukubia on the IM reminds me of Mr. Death. That is the Errol Morris movie. And if you want to know how those people move from one ideology into another, Mr. Death really does show, with a type of person. It's also, going to be more relevant too as we go forward. Turning a blind eye, getting positive feedback, it can change you. It certainly can. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.